What's up, y'all? Lyle here with a very special guest today. It's my own wife. I'm loving this. This is great. We threw around a myriad of topics to talk about, but what we are going to work through is this: how to lead together, how to pastor together, and not end up divorced. How's that for a title?
I think it's important, you want to stay married.
You just
want to stay married.
Married. That is good advice.
Yep.
And I'm happy that you're here today, my love. Thank you for joining me on my podcast. A lot of people don't know this, but you and I actually started our podcasting journey together.
Yes. What was the little thing we would record with that would sit in the middle of the table?
I think it's called an H1N or something like that. Like it was like this little device that was so expensive for us at the time. I think it was like $300. I got it from a Guitar Center and I had no idea what I was doing, but we ended up with two old corded microphones. We plugged it into that H1N and then we would sit at our dining room table and record podcast that we called Conversations. And we would just have conversations about kind of anything.
Anything that we thought about, we'd say, all right, let's sit down and have a conversation. And we just do it on the podcast. And maybe some of our kids would be awake. Sometimes we'd do it when they were asleep. It was always so much fun. I some of the topics that we talked about, I definitely don't agree with our conclusions 10 years later.
Right, yeah.
But that's the beauty of a podcast because you get to watch somebody evolve over time. I think it's
true.
I mean, we struck it from the record. I think we've got rid of conversations on.
I don't think it's anywhere public.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. I remember we did an episode on like immigration reform.
Yes.
Like we would never talk about that today. Well, at least you wouldn't talk about that.
Yeah. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I know enough about immigration reform to talk about it today.
I know.
I thought I knew a lot then.
No, I don't think we thought we knew a lot, actually. We just read like the bill that came out at the time because it's what everybody was talking about. And then we did like a reaction to this political document, right? Like we probably wouldn't do that today. And the reason I say you probably wouldn't do that today is because you don't really enjoy the smoke of social media.
No, we were just talking about it earlier. I'm not big into social media in general. It's kind of like a necessary evil. I very much use social media socially. Like I keep up with my friends, with the church, make sure that, I'm sharing stuff that's happening for our church community. But yeah, I'm not really into like the social media chaos, the swirl. I'm trying to stay out of that.
Of course.
Usually.
I understand. I think we all probably dislike that swirl.
Yep.
I don't know. Some people seem to enjoy it, but I know for me, like anytime I even get a negative comment, like it hurts my feelings.
Yeah, if it doesn't hurt your feelings, you're pretending.
You think so?
Oh my gosh. If it doesn't hurt your feelings, you're pretending. And you have developed some form of masterful lying ability if somebody being mean to you doesn't hurt your feelings.
You think people just get calloused?
No, I think just people lie.
And they pretend like it doesn't hurt their feelings.
For sure.
Dang. That's kind of a hot take because I feel like there are some people I watch online. I'm like, dude, how do you have such thick skin?
Yeah.
Like people will say stuff to me on social media and like, if it's on my page, sometimes I just delete their comment. Sometimes I leave it, But I was telling Andrew the other day, I was like, man, I think I need to do a mass unfollow because I have been following some people since 2011, 2012 when Instagram first came out. And I don't even know what's happening in their life anymore. Perhaps I followed pages I thought were funny or entertaining. And now those pages have devolved into more dark humor or things that honestly I wouldn't even pay attention to today. And they don't come through my feed because I haven't seen a post from that person in years. And yet they're still in my follower count. So somebody the other day, I guess, was looking through my follower count and they were like, this guy follows somebody on the Epstein list. And I'm like, I guess it's President Trump. I don't know. Like I was just like, okay, crap. Like deleted the comment because I'm like, that's out of pocket. Like I don't want people to think something other than what is true. And I don't actually know what's true. Maybe this guy knows something I don't know about somebody I follow aside from the president. but it was still hurtful. And I'm like, I need to do a mass unfollow.
Yeah, see, and that's why social media, exhausting, unnecessary. But, podcasts are great. And I'm glad we're doing this one.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you actually glad we're doing this?
I looked forward to it today.
Okay. Well,
I canceled plans for this.
Did you?
Mm-hmm,
what did you have to do otherwise?
I was going to hang out with a friend.
Oh, okay. Well, whoever that is, sorry. But I'm glad that you're here. Honestly, our podcasts have been so good, and I'm glad that we're going to do this episode because they've always been fun and they've always been helpful to people who have listened to them. I get to travel quite a bit for ministry, and we don't always get to travel together. But I can't tell you how many people, even 10 years ago, would tap me on the shoulder in a lobby somewhere and say, hey, thanks for Conversations podcast, man. Me and my spouse listen to this together, and we're just really blessed by what you guys talk about. So I'm glad we're going to talk about this topic today, which is how to lead together and stay married and not get divorced. And this is something that you and I have done from the very beginning of our marriage, because when we met, I was pastoring a church. Now, we didn't talk about it like a church at the time. It was more of a missions base. But the very first Sunday that we ever had a quote unquote public service was on January the 1st, 2012. And on January the 1st, 2012, you and I met for the very first time in person.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I definitely remember that.
Of course you do. How could you forget that, right?
I remember being so grateful for what God was doing there, also a little bit weirded out, and absolutely struck by your Southern accent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, baby.
Yep.
I knew you loved that.
Yep. I remember because I lived in California at the time. I left and I couldn't remember how tall you were.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't remember if you were taller than me or at my eye level when we were talking, because I was so overcome by your accent. I couldn't gather any
That's
other
what I'm
information.
talking about.
Yeah. So
I knew you loved me.
It stuck.
From the moment we met.
Yeah, that was exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
Just love at first sight.
That's what I like to say.
Yep.
I remember when we met, I was interested in you and wanted to talk to you, but you made it very clear to me, I live in California. I'm not moving back home to Nashville, Tennessee anytime soon. In fact, I'm probably going to be there for 5 years. Now, because of ministry, I said, well, there's no way that we could ever work. And then you also knew I was doing missions in India. So what was your read on ministry at the time and being involved with me as someone doing ministry?
Yeah, I loved your heart for missions, but I knew that the Lord had really placed in my heart a passion for the local church. So I never really saw myself. I was evolving. I was in a place where it was starting to evolve, where I had gone from a missions only framework to now maybe I can contribute in a big way to local church and have a big impact. And I was falling in love with the local church. And so I remember us having a conversation and me saying, like, I don't think this is going to work out for us to be together, because I don't want you to compromise on your calling to the mission field. But I feel so called to ministering to the local church in America and specifically in Europe. I just had this heart for it, and I didn't want to call you away. I knew you would never call me away from what the Lord had asked me to do. And so we didn't go our separate ways, but we had to, in that moment, figure out a very true thing for us in the entirety of our marriage, which was compromise, like true compromise, truly hearing from the Lord on what does ministry look like when we're both involved without compromising on the word of God over our lives holistically. And so I think that kind of started that journey for us that we still very much have to do today.
That's right.
Because we're so different.
We're so different, and it's never not been hard for us to do ministry together.
Right.
I think that's something that people listening, especially those who are married and doing ministry together, need to hear. It has never not been hard for us to do ministry together. Yep. And even though we've been married now for 13 years, basically, and we're coming up on 13 here, even though we've been married for 13 years, like, what people need to know from the start is that it has never not been difficult for us to do ministry together. And I think in part because we're so different than one another. I remember when we met, asking a friend of ours, like, do you think it's even possible for us to work out? Because what she wants and what I want is two totally different things.
Yep.
And also, like, she lives in California and I live in Nashville. And I remember them asking me, like, when have you lived in the same city for a number of years straight since you've been saved? And I'm like, well, I never have. I've always moved about from, Kentucky to Africa to India. And I lived a few other cities in the process, Texas, DC. And so I'm like, I've always moved about. And so they told me, well, why wouldn't you reach out to Allyson on Facebook? Because that's all we had at the time. Like, ask her for a Skype date. And we'll do another episode and talk about our whole history and our relationship and all of that. But I remember us having that conversation, us getting married, and then us quickly taking a couple of mission trips. So even though you had a passion for the local church, you were open to doing mission trips, and you were open to what God had been doing in my life prior to us meeting.
Of course, because missions is ministry of the local church. It's part of our duty is to send missionaries, and I love the mission field. And it was so quick. We went on probably 2 or 3 missions trip within the first year of our marriage. And you were already doing nonprofit world and had responsibilities with your nonprofit, and you needed to travel and check in on the work and, stay connected. And, I remember just watching you move in that arena. I was so overcome with the reality of how different we were. I mean, it wasn't, several weeks after we got married that I realized, wow, we really are completely polar opposite in the way that we navigate the rhythm of our life. Not necessarily our passion for the Lord, our passion for the mission field, our passion for the local church. Our passion has always been the same. So we have zeal, similar zeal, but it's almost like zeal turned in separate directions, where it's but I'm going to move in this way, and I have zeal to move in this way. And I thought I was going to die. I remember telling you when we were on one mission trip, I was like, we're never doing this ever again. This is too hard. This is too overwhelming. I feel so unsafe. I feel so uncovered, not by you, but just by the whole experience. And I was like, if this is how it's going to be, I don't know how this is going to work out.
But not divorce, not work out. It was more missions are not going to work out. I just want to clarify that. It wasn't like you gave me an ultimatum, either leave ministry or divorce.
No, but that's the beauty of our story, is because I think we knew from the beginning how much we were going to have to compromise. That was no surprise to us when we met.
Right.
When we got together, we were so sober-minded about how different we were. Mm-hmm. And it came in waves of understanding the depth of how different we were as we stayed married. But there was never an option for us to hit eject, because we had made such a conscious decision that we're going to work through this and we're going to see this to the other side. And in that context, I was very much I'm never traveling like this with you ever again.
I think this happened when we were out in the bush with Heidi Baker.
100%.
Because she, Heidi moves with the Spirit, right? So you never know what you might be doing on that particular day.
Absolutely.
And that's something I was very used to, being in the Iris world, but it was not something you were very used to. And I remember on this particular day, we were somewhere in some village far from home base.
Yes.
And this village needed a new latrine dug.
No. It needed a new church foundation dug.
Oh, yeah. So,
but it also did need a new latrine. And the reason is because we had to dig the new church foundation where the old latrines were.
Ah, okay. So you remember the story better than I do.
In every detail, every facet of it.
Okay. And so the new church was going to be where the old latrines were. And so as we were digging, we didn't have adequate tools.
No.
So there were no Western tools like shovels and pickaxes or whatever you think of as a Western tool. It was like, use your hands and a few other things, right? And I remember being down in this ditch. I was like in the pit, using my hands, getting all this dirt and sand up out of the way so that we could create a footer path for the new church building. It's coming back to me. And we ran into the old latrine. Mm-hmm. And so like, imagine running in to an old latrine is like basically opening up a sewer.
Yep.
Right. And I remember at that point, you were like, okay, like I'm getting out of this.
This is my boundary.
Situation. Like I am not going to be in an open sewer with you while you are trying to pave a path for a new church foundation, digging through waste.
Yes.
And that's when you were like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work.
I was like, is there a truck back home anytime soon? But yeah, I think that's like the perfect picture of what, like ministry and church has been for us, because
I was clueless, by the way.
But that's actually like one of my favorite things about you as a leader. Not that you're clueless, but that your zeal to build overrides the fear of what stands in the way of what you're building. So you are going to clear a path in the worst situation, and you're going to lay a foundation. That's how you are. And I'm really good at saying when is when, where maybe you're not going to be as great at knowing when is when, like, hey, now's the time. We need to back up and like really take inventory of this. At the time, it was a funny, traumatic story, but looking back on it, that's been the entirety of our ministry journey, is recognizing like, I can never stop you from pioneering and building, even in the most chaotic situations, because that's how the Lord has built you. But you'll never be able to stop me from having domino eyes. That's how I can see how things will domino out in the future and say, okay, maybe there's a better way for us to do this, or a more efficient way for us to do this. And I think in the early days, it felt like tension. And sometimes it still feels like tension.
Right.
But it feels less tension now, and it feels more harmonious as we've allowed each other to be that. But I think we've ran into a lot of roadblocks along the way trying to figure that out.
Yeah, we certainly have. I mean, I think that whenever we came back home and determined that we would plant a local church, we had done missions in Mozambique together. We had done missions in India together. We had done missions in South America together. At this point, this is before we even had a kid.
Right.
And then when we came back, our son, Isaiah, was born in 2015. And then we planted our church in 2016.
Right after our second was born.
Right after Remy arrived. And for us, we never really thought of not doing ministry together. We never really had that thought. And we always determined that we would do ministry together, which was honestly a lot of growth for me, coming up in a ministry tradition where you didn't hear from a lot of women pastors, preachers, leaders. I mean, women were certainly around. Most of them were worship leaders. It was very rare. I don't recall ever seeing any co-pastors with like men and women together as a kid coming up in church. I never saw that. And so I remember when I first got saved and started preaching, I thought that what would happen is that I would get married and then my wife would like run my merch table. Like I had no grid at all for my wife and I doing ministry together. I think it was actually like Heidi that broke that grid, because I saw her operating apostolically and preaching and teaching and praying and church planting and doing the things that she did as a leader. She was very much the leader of Iris, even though her and Roland led together. Her personality presented a lot more often than his. They were leading together, and I take nothing away from Papa Roland. He's a legend. He's a saint. He's goated, But Heidi was the one that was typically traveling and preaching and on platform and all that stuff. And so I learned in that experience, like, oh, women can be just as empowered as men are in this ministry context, because I'm seeing her do everything that any guy could do herself. And of course, Roland was a part of that. It's not like she was completely independent or autonomous, but I was so taken by that. And I thought, okay, well, that's awesome. That's amazing. And then I think at the time, especially as a charismatic, like women in ministry was such a hot topic issue,
right?
Where everybody was talking about it.
Yes.
And I remember at Bethel, like Chris Valentin did this whole series and wrote this book called Fashion to Reign. And he talked about women in ministry. And that was so catalytic even for me at the time to say, oh, okay, I didn't realize this, but women can be empowered and in many cases should be empowered as men are empowered to lead and serve and be in ministry and be pastors and all that. So coming up in that environment, we didn't really face a whole lot of theological pushback or tension because we've always been Pentecostal. But it really was something that we had to learn how to do practically, because even though we said, hey, we're co-pastors, we stepped into this church planting journey as co-pastors, and then we faced a ton of tension immediately as to how our church would run culturally, how it would feel, decisions that we would make as leaders, and just who got to make the call when it came time to determine what our church would do next. So I don't know if you can think of any specific examples, like when we first started planting. I just remember that part of our journey being difficult, especially when we first got started.
Yeah, no, I think that you're spot on. We never faced much resistance in regards to like the maybe theological or even cultural pressure. One, because we planted together. So anybody who came to be a part of Legacy knew that was what was going to happen, is that there was going to be a mothering figure and a fathering figure in the picture. And if you don't want to be a part of that, you weren't going to be a part of Legacy from the beginning. So I think in a lot of ways, we did that part right. We were upfront about that. We didn't have to turn a big ship. So, and empower me over time and try to get people to care. People cared from the beginning. And that's also a blessing of our church. People have always cared about both of our voices. So yeah, no, I think we ran into a lot of things practically, especially things like, I would say like team selection, culture determinations, because we are so different. You can imagine the kind of leader that I would empower is not the kind of leader that you would empower. I would say that was the first primary roadblock we ran into when it came to the practicals of building a church, a local church together. The leaders that you choose and the leaders that I choose are not the same leader. So who gets to determine who's the leader?
Right.
You know, which one of us gets to determine who's in charge of that department or in charge of that thing? Because when I'm looking around, my eyes are going to land on someone who is probably an SC on the DISC test. So if you guys are familiar with the DISC, there's DISC. My eyes look for leaders that have strong S.
Like and the steadfast, safe temperament.
Yes. And strong C. I don't ever want them to leave. So I want you to be consistent, because for me, the pastoral ministry of the church guides the way that I'm going to see the lens I see leadership through. So like the pastoral ministry is the lens that I look through. So I'm looking for steadfast consistency. And I don't care if you're the best. I don't care if you're the biggest. I don't care if you're actually very good at what you do. So long as you consistently put in effort and you don't make a mess in my environment. So I don't have a very big tolerance for like young gun leaders. I don't personally. And when you're church planting, guess who are the only people that show up to your church?
Yep. It's those passionate, full of zeal, not always full of wisdom type young gun leaders.
But I had no clue. I had no clue how to disciple those people, but I think that you were on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which is
the ID leaders, the influential, dominant type leaders, those with charisma, or, you know, like, man, I got it going on, or I dress cool and I gather people to myself very organically. Like, I love people like that because I'm more like that, where it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, like we may not necessarily be steadfast or consistent all the time. We're not that good at admin, but you know what? People love to hear us talk and we're cool, you know? So it's like, we developed this church, because I preach more often than you do and always have, but
praise God.
Yeah, because you don't like preaching. I love preaching. As I'm sure if you're watching or listening to this, you can probably fill out the energy here. It's like, I love doing this. It's you like doing it because we're doing it together.
Yeah, because I like
doing
you.
ministry.
Yeah.
I know that. I like you too, and I love you.
Thanks, babe.
But it's just more, I think, challenging for you. And so as I would like promote these type of leaders, you'd be like, yo, hold on, time out. Like, why are you giving this individual an opportunity whenever they're not steadfast, they're not consistent? I see that they're cool, they're anointed, like they can communicate or lead worship, but they don't have the character fortification required to really lead with a long delta. Like this has got shelf life on it, bro. And I'd be like, no, it's going to be fine. Like I'm going to help them and I'm going to get them to grow in that area. And that would cause a lot of conflict for us.
Like at home. Yeah. That would be the thing we would take home. That would cause the most tension in our marriage was disagreement about people. Mm-hmm. So because ministry, it can feel very like, out here sometimes just when we talk about ministry, but really at the end of the day, all tension in ministry is related to people. And for us, like that's the conversations we would take home. Lyle and I are I would say we're way better at not letting church come home with us as much, but in a bad way. But then there's a good side of things where church absolutely comes home with us because people come home with us. Their stories, their burdens, their challenges, all of those things. That stuff, I think, still stays home with us. But in the early days, there was no segment. There's no like line between home life and church life. Mm-hmm. And that, I think for me, was really difficult. Maybe it wasn't as difficult for you.
No, it was super difficult for me too. Yeah. And I think maybe that's the first principle that we should share with you guys. If you're listening to this podcast, watching it because of the title we shared, like how to lead together and not get divorced. This is probably principle 1 right here. Like you need to create some boundaries in your relationship with your spouse where you will and you won't talk about what you're leading together, whether that's a ministry or a business, because there are times in which that does not need to dominate the conversation. And when you're in church or you're doing business together, it's so easy to let those things dominate every dinner.
Yes.
Even when you go on a date night, like, hey, let's do a date night. And so rather than get together and talk about our future or talk about our passions or talk about our dreams or talk about our vacation that we want to go on or talk about our children or talk about our finances, what are we doing? We're talking about the people that we've empowered that we disagree on. And it's dominating everything. And then you better believe it creates conflict.
Yep.
And then I'm upset, you're upset. It's like, we just can't do this together.
Yep.
But of course, we would come back and say, you know what? We're called to do this together. And that's probably principle number 2. I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think that couples need to discern what God has called them to do together and what he's not called them to do together.
Yes, that's exactly
they
what
just
I was
feel pressure to do it together because that is what Lyle and Allyson do, or that's what Rich and Don Cherie do, or that's what Robert and Taylor do. And I'm not trying to put us in that group. Those are our friends. But I think like as our culture looks at these people who are leading very influential churches in our generation, they're like, well, I've got to do it like that or else I'm failing. No, you don't. You don't have to lead with your spouse. That's not required. But I think there's this societal, cultural, church pressure that when you're married, you have to do everything together.
Right.
And I don't think that's necessary. I think you've got to discern what God has called you guys to do together. And that's something that we've always done through every season.
I agree. And I love that. That was your second principle, because I would absolutely echo that. You have to determine from like a prayerful perspective, what has God called you to do and what has God called your spouse to do together and separate. And that was so practical for us, like working out that within the context of church. When we stopped bringing those conflicts home was when we determined, what are you going to do at Legacy and what am I going to do at Legacy? Yep. Because we can't spend time making every decision together, because we will make no decisions at all because we're so different. So where can you be best suited to make decisions based on your strength? And where can I be best suited to make decisions based upon mine? Now, I trust you to make decisions in those arenas. That doesn't have to come home with me because I'm not even invested in those arenas in the same way, and vice versa. And I think that's something that comes through time, prayer, exposure, and figuring out how you want to do life first and foremost, and then ministry secondarily if you are leading together with your spouse.
Mhm.
Some people watching this podcast are not going to be in ministry. They're going to be running a business together. They're going to be opening a restaurant, having rental properties, doing Airbnb, owning, all sorts of different things. But their life, whether you recognize it or not with your spouse, is it's a business together. You guys are doing finances. Even if you're working separate jobs, you're raising children together, and you have to make these determinations in every arena of your life. Hey, what are the decisions that you make? What are the decisions that I make? And then
what are the decisions that we
make together?
We've even used that language.
Mm-hmm.
What are the decisions that you make? What are the decisions that I make? And what are the decisions that we make?
Exactly. The we make always take the longest.
For sure, because it involves two opinions, right? And
That
so
are
you
very
have to
different.
sort through, who gets to win this, or, who's going to acquiesce here, or talk me through that perspective. And, ultimately both of us, I believe, are humble enough to want the best idea to win. So it's not about my perspective. It's about the best perspective. Some days I have the best perspective. Some days you have the best perspective. And unless we are humble enough to be able to, allow one another to speak, and unless we're humble enough to open our hearts to listen, it's difficult to determine what's best. We just fight for what's ours.
Exactly.
So we have learned this over time. And so can I revisit, I think you hit a new principle there, and I do want to come back to that. But, the second principle that we hit on, I think, is about discernment. And I want to say this to anybody who is leading with their spouse. You need to discern if God has called you to lead with your spouse. Because if he has not, you may be putting yourself through all sorts of unnecessary suffering trying to do something that you feel church culture or company culture has told you is best, when in fact it's not for you guys.
Totally.
Like, you've really got to discern that. And we have done that multiple times when it's been hard, because we've gone back to the place of prayer and we've asked the Lord, are we hearing from you clearly? Because this is so challenging. Are you sure we're supposed to lead together? And every time we do that, God always reminds us, you guys are supposed to lead together. So I think there is something happening there in regards to discernment. But I also want to say this. If you hear, yes, okay, God's called us to lead together, you then need to discern the timing and also the how of that outcome. How does that express, right? So in this season, it looks very different than it did in 2016.
Agreed.
In this season, we have 4 kids.
Yep.
In this season, you're not as present as you used to be at the office. And yet, I feel we're still being obedient to God's word.
Absolutely.
And we're still leading together.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So it just looks different in different seasons.
Exactly.
And it doesn't always have to look the same, even if you've discerned that we're supposed to lead together.
I agree. And I think, for us, our marriage thriving has always been the bullseye for anything that we do in our life, including ministry. Ministry is very important. We both come from families. I mean, you probably even more so than me come from families that deeply value the local church. We grew up in church. I love ministry. I love the fact that what I do today, I'll get to experience the ramifications of that for the rest of eternity. That there's nothing that excites me more than that. But the reality is, ministry is not, my ministry to the flock is still not my ministry to you or to my kids. And if I miss out on those things because I am trying to figure out how to be relevant within the context of the church that we're building, that's going to throw things off in our marriage. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the marriage thriving is the bullseye of every other entity that we're building. And I think that's one thing that we've done really well is in seasons of discernment is we just keep the right thing the priority.
Right. Yeah.
It's we still like each other and have fun together, and we're still friends, and our kids know that and they're annoyed by it. And I feel so thrilled that my kids think when we hug, it's gross. And like, they're just like, oh, mom, dad, you're always, no. And I love that. That feels like such a win. That feels so like, I feel so successful in that arena of my life, recognizing that, okay, if church is thriving, marriage is thriving, okay, we're getting our kids to a place of thriving, then, okay, I feel released to go more all in on things like church building,
that's right,
team strategy, that kind of stuff. But until those things are settled, like you don't want to lose what's most important on the altar of building, a ministry. And everybody says that. But practically, it can feel very painful to be the one that has to take the step back in order to be the safeguard at home when, church is going as well as it's going right now.
That's right. Because there is such thing as promises, and there are definitely such things as priorities.
Yes.
And yes, we do have a promise that we will lead together, that we will see breakthrough in families because of how we've yielded to the Spirit's call for us to lead together. But there's also priorities, and those priorities cannot be overlooked at the expense of, well, God has called us. He's promised us this opportunity for breakthrough in ministry together. Therefore, we're going to overlook our kids. We're going to overlook our marriage. We're going to overlook our personal home and finances and other things that are deeply important and must thrive if we're really going to do the calling well at all.
Exactly.
And so I think it's important that, people really investigate. If you would discern, I am supposed to lead with my spouse, praise God. But you've also got to make sure that as you engage that promise from the Lord, you are not overlooking necessary priorities at home.
I love that.
Very important, because if you do that, if you neglect those priorities, in the name of pursuing a promise together, well, your ministry is going to suffer.
Yes.
And whenever, your kids grow up, they may not want to talk to you. And that is not going to be good, because no one is going to be at your side on your deathbed holding your hand that went to your church when you were building 25 years ago, most likely.
100%.
But who is and should be and who you really want to be there is going to be your spouse and your children. So you can't overlook your priorities in the name of promises and just think everything's going to be fine. So that was like principle number 2.
That's so
I think
great.
Principle number 3 is descriptions. And just getting back to like, what do you do? What do I do? And what do we do? Right. So like principle number 3, like, not only do you need to discern what God's called you to do, but you need to write out a description of how you guys are going to do it. Now, this was a huge breakthrough for us. Like whenever we were able to determine this, I feel like our ministry was able to soar.
Absolutely. And our marriage was able to thrive outside of constantly talking about ministry.
Constantly talking about ministry. It was like we were mad at each other. And I think the thing that I would get upset about, I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you do.
Oh, I can't wait.
Where I was like, stop trying to lead through me.
Oh, yes.
Right? So like, what I would want Allyson to do is like, if she saw a problem, address the problem.
Yep.
Right? Because you and I are lead pastors. But what I would often experience is that rather than address the problem, you would come to me.
Absolutely.
And I don't necessarily know that you were asking me to address the problem. Maybe you're just coming to me first.
Right.
But I felt that you were asking me to address the problem. And I'm like, I can't address the problems I see and the problems you see.
Exactly.
I'm too overwhelmed. That's too much stuff. So either lead or don't lead, but don't lead through me. Like you are empowered.
Yep.
You are the pastor. You can say what you want. But like our personalities are different too, where you're like, well, I don't want to like come in and punch this guy. And I don't want to either. But I think that's where we had a lot of conflict. And doing the descriptions absolve that conflict entirely.
Because we knew all of a sudden what problems were mine to solve and what problems were yours to solve.
That's right.
Because any problems that were ours to solve, I was going to expect you to solve them.
Right.
If that makes sense. And that's just like, I think that's a natural like reality to marriage and a natural reality to a husband and wife dynamic. And I think that's how it should.
Well, not everybody's though.
Right.
Because you're about to say how it should be.
Yeah.
And now I think we need to get into the theology of this.
Yeah. Because I think that also is something that I easily embrace is a life where, I joyfully submit to the dynamic where you get to lead out in front. I don't desire it. It's not actually even in my nature.
Right.
So if any problem's ours to solve, it's yours to solve.
Which makes it easy, right? Because you don't desire it.
Right.
But it's another thing to bring it into the world of theology. And because like, imagine that you did desire it, right? Because we have some friends, and I know there are some couples that are going to watch this, and I can even think of a couple right now in my head that I'm like, yo, these couples leading together, they are two high-powered individuals. Sometimes the female's more ambitious than the male.
That's right.
But the male, being a man, is the one given opportunity more often, especially in ministry, because men are very naturally seen as the executive leader of the whole, right? But maybe the woman is more ambitious. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Sometimes it's the best thing to be ambitious, to bless other people and do what God's called you to do. So I don't mean it in a bad way. But like, you're not ambitious for ministry. You're not trying to lead your own thing. You don't want to start your own podcast. You don't want to start your own nonprofit. You don't want to, start your own Bible study on Zoom. Like you don't want to do those things.
Right.
And I'm glad you don't.
Sweet.
I'm super glad you don't, because but was this not a part of our conversation when we got married?
No, it's so true.
Because I was like, yo, if you are as ambitious as me, oh my God, we're both going to die.
Literally, we would have died.
We're going to die.
I think we would have died.
Because I was like, I got so much things I want to do. And you were like, yo, that's awesome.
That's great.
I don't want to do those things. So like, coming into marriage, I was like, no disrespect, Joyce, but I was like, I can't marry Joyce Myers. Well, not her individually, but specifically. I just mean like a woman like her who's like going to have this big public platform globally, and I'm going to be her tag along. Not that her husband is that. I just was like, I cannot marry a woman in ministry of that stat. It's just not what I wanted.
Exactly.
And I was always honest about
that.
I was like, if you want to be the person up front, like I want you to be. If you want to preach, I want you to preach. Like, there's never been a time where you've said, I'd like to preach, and I'm like, no.
Never. And has there ever been a time where I've said that? I want to preach?
No.
Okay.
Not really. Maybe once.
Maybe once.
Like, I got this word, I really, but it's just not like, so our chemistry in that sense is good. So I just want to acknowledge that there's some people, they're going to read it, or they're going to listen to this.
Yes.
And we're going to get to this part and they're going to check out. They're like, well, of course you guys don't have any problems because.
Right. That's our one arena that there is natural harmony. So like maybe they have 10 other arenas that aren't like
where
that for us, where they have natural harmony. Maybe they're going to choose the same kind of leader. So they're going to empower people. The culture actually galvanizes so much faster because they look for the same thing, but then they have tension in upfront leadership because they both want the same opportunity.
Yes.
So they might have tension there that we don't have there, but have maybe behind the scenes.
Because some people think I'm like overly dominant because I preach all the time. Like, oh, you say that you and your wife are leading together, but you're not, because look how often you preach. I'm like, bro, my wife don't want to preach.
No.
She doesn't. If you wanted to preach, you could preach more often. And she knows that. And we know that, and that's something that's very much understood. If she says, I got a word for Sunday, she's preaching Sunday. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't let my wife preach. I think like it's this thing like on Mother's Day where people let their wife, let her preach. Okay, fine, if that's what your culture is set up like. But for me, it's like I've never had to let my wife preach. I want my wife to preach. If she wants to preach, thing is though, if she doesn't sense from the Spirit that she's supposed to be in the pulpit every Sunday or every other Sunday or every third Sunday or whatever it might be. Like, in that sense, it is a little easier for us.
For sure.
But also I would say like theologically, because I want to come back to this because I know people are going to ask this question. Like, I'm not an egalitarian.
Right.
I don't think that men and women are completely equal in every single thing. Yes, I do believe that we are equal as human beings.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that despite the fact that I'm a man and she's a woman, I am no more valuable in the eyes of God than she is, and vice versa.
Right.
So like, that's not where I'm going with this. Like, I'm very much a complementarian in that I have a respect for what I wholeheartedly believe is a biblical articulation of roles within marriage.
Agreed.
So within the context of a covenant marriage, there are specific roles or attributes, or if you even want to call it a job description.
Yeah.
I believe the Bible's pretty clear about that.
Yeah.
And my job as the husband is to be the head of the household and lead the household. It doesn't mean that I don't love her. It doesn't mean that I don't sacrifice for her. It doesn't mean that I don't put her in front of myself very often, because obviously I do. And that's right there in the scripture. Yep. But my job as the head is to be the chief decision maker.
And I love that. Like,
that's what I believe headship really is biblically.
Yeah. It's like, we say this in the context of work. And I think most people can understand this in the context of like a job or an opportunity, which is problems roll uphill.
Yes.
So that's why, and that's why I said, earlier, hey, if it's an us problem, I lean to you to make, to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. And that's just our natural rhythm, because one, we want to honor the Lord in our marriage. Mm-hmm. So that's like a huge priority to us. So we want to do things God's way, because we have found that there's a lot of value and a lot of thriving that happens, when we do that. But two, I think that it makes sense, like, hey, if it's an us problem and you need to solve it, I give you full permission to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that took years for us to get there, because I had, I think, taken on an understanding early on in ministry, early on in marriage, that like, oh man, maybe I'm supposed to shoulder the weight of making some of those decisions because we see things so differently. And the reality is, like, the Lord put me with who He put me with on purpose, so that I could walk in the fullness that God has for my life, for your life. And, as I've learned to lean in and see you make those decisions with so much wisdom and so much grace, it builds that trust. So, and then over time, now it becomes a no-brainer in our marriage, and it becomes a safeguard in our ministry, because we know who solves what problems. Maybe I'm going to solve problems that look more pastoral, because I understand things through a pastoral lens. I just said this to you the other day. One of the things that I think is a value in our culture is we give people second chances. And that's something that's a huge value to me. I want to give somebody a second, third, fourth chance, because I recognize that's what the Lord would do for us, and has done for me, and has done for you countless times and in countless ways. If we're going to start something new that's going to pioneer into a new city or a new place in the city that we're in, you're going to make those kind of decisions because you have a lens, a more apostolic lens. And so you're going to look at ministry through the lens of impact. And I think that's, once we wrote those job descriptions and said, hey, these are the problems that you solve, these are the problems that I solve, everything became so much easier and clearer, and we fought so much less.
Yeah, it's true. And so there is a benefit of our personalities. There is an outcome, a result of us doing the work to putting the description down on paper. But I just want to make sure that I'm, saying this so clear, is like, we want to build our lives on the Bible.
Exactly.
And the way that we interpret the scripture about the roles of men and women in marriage, we carry over into the church, because the church
absolutely
is a family in a very real sense. We know that scripture says that, God's family is the church, the pillar and foundation of truth. I think that's 2 Timothy, and I can't remember the translation, but it doesn't mean that there's not moments, like on staff, for instance, where we say, hey, we're a team. We're not relating together right now as a family, where you can just do whatever you want. And you're still accepted. Now you have a job description 100%. And you're expected to perform. But by and large, the church, whenever Jesus talks about the church and the bride and the bridegroom and marriage, then you see there's a picture there of a mom and a dad.
That's right.
And so when we first came into pastoring, we took that very seriously, and we said, every family has, every good family, has a present mother and it has a present father.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean they have the same role. They have completely different roles. They have completely different set of responsibilities. But in order for the family to thrive and mature and to grow up healthy and strong and sturdy, we need both present. Now, this is no shot to anybody who doesn't have, the pastor's wife present or anything like that. I think each local congregation must do what is faithfulness to God. For Legacy Nashville, this is what we feel is best and what God's called us to do. We're not out here arguing with people and their interpretation of how much a woman should be empowered and so on and so forth. I know different people have different takes, and we can do another podcast on that. But at the end of the day, we're standing on Scripture. We are, and we're connected to our convictions. And we respect one another's roles, and ultimately we serve in the capacity we do, not to try to be right, but to raise up righteous people.
Absolutely.
And I think we do this well because we're able to defer one another when it's wise, or when it's biblical, or whenever it's just best for the people we pastor.
Exactly.
So I think this works when you have two people who have hearts to honor, to defer, to bless, and to ultimately think more of the people they pastor than their opportunity to lead.
That's key.
So I think that's key. And we've obviously offered a couple of principles here so far. Do you have any final guiding principles that you would advise people of? Like, if you're trying to lead together right now and you're like, we can't do this, we're on the brink of divorce. That was the purpose of this whole episode.
Yeah.
Is there any final words of wisdom that you would give people who are leading together to say, don't get divorced?
For sure.
You can do it. Yeah. Here's what you should do instead.
I love that. I mean, we're obviously being a little cheeky, okay, not get divorced. But the reality is, if you look at the state of the church in America, the Western church,
right.
Ministers, it's not just overt divorce, but there's infidelity, there's clear disconnection in the relationship between husbands and wives, and it doesn't start all of a sudden. It's little decisions over time that create cracks in a marriage that leads to a big infidelity moment or a big moral failure that then leads to divorce. So we know nobody gets into ministry together assuming that it's going to walk them down that road. But I believe if Satan has it his way, ministers are going to be living in chaos, confusion, and disconnection from their spouses and from their families.
Right.
And so one thing that I would absolutely encourage is don't let things go too far, in the sense that get help, get support. I mean, I remember feeling like such dummies. We were 2 years into our marriage. I'm like, what problems should we have? But we found a marriage counselor because we were at a place where we were like, this is our disconnections are becoming uncomfortable for us. Because Lyle and I are both very naturally passive in our confrontation style. We have gotten so much better over the years of being more honest about what we need from each other. But we could live in the same house and not speak for 2 weeks to each other. And we would just pour each other coffee and be disconnected. So it got to
not now,
but this is early on in our marriage when we would have these disconnected moments.
I don't want to give anybody the impression we don't talk for 2 weeks in our house. That would never happen today.
No, never happen. But it's because
12 years ago
it would happen.
They're like, oh well,
just
Allison's mad at me, I'm mad at her, so let's just
ride it out.
Yeah, it's all good.
And it's just, that's not good enough. If you're in ministry, that is not a good enough tool. That is a bad tool. You need to go get better tools in your tool belt and not, get 10 years down the road and realize that's the only tool you've been using. And now, surprise, you're so disconnected that you have nothing in common anymore. Your kids graduate, you end up wanting to split up. It's not that it happens all of a sudden. It's slowly over time. So my encouragement for anybody who is wanting to lean into a reality of leading together is don't let the tools you have be the only tools that you have, for the future. Go find new tools, go to marriage counseling, go to conferences, go make sure that you have good friends in your life that really know you and can call you out when they see that your marriage is on the rocks or not doing well. But that would be my biggest encouragement is again, we're being cheeky about it, but this is a reality. This is what's happening across the church right now. And you don't get there all of a sudden.
No, you don't.
It's over time. And it just would be best if you address that as soon as you can and recognize, even if you feel silly, we're only 3 years in, we shouldn't need this help. Yeah, you do need the help, not because you're bad, but because you're not born with those tools. You need to go find them so that you can thrive in your connection in your marriage.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think just to echo that, I would say that if you're not going to prioritize your marriage, then you don't need to be in ministry together. And I would even just say separately, if you're not going to prioritize your marriage, you don't need to be in ministry at all.
Period.
Because if you're married, your first ministry is going to be, aside from the Lord Jesus himself, is going to be to your spouse. And if you don't take care of that first ministry, good luck having a long-term ministry to anybody else, especially not your kids, your church, and whomever else you want to preach to. I would love to see the days of pastors getting divorced behind us.
I agree.
I would love to see that. And it starts before you get married. It starts in the dating process. It starts with tools. It starts with honesty. It starts with vulnerability. It continues with coaching and counseling and pastoral care and all of the things that are required to get people to the point where they're remaining married and their church is thriving as they serve and lead together. And I'm grateful we've been able to do that. I think we still have, moments where it gets difficult.
For sure.
Right now, we don't have a ton of tension because we just had our fourth child.
Yep.
And Ezra's only 4 months old right now. So you're spending a lot of time with him, a lot of time at home.
Focus is there. Yeah.
And which you haven't done in the past.
Never.
Because we've always just brought the kids to work and we're just doing it together. And I guess it was probably Dr. Henry Cloud who was like, hey, this time maybe let's not do that, giving us some
permission,
permission to let it look different in different seasons. And so if you guys are leading together, we just want you to know you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Yes, it's going to be difficult at times, but hopefully some of these principles have helped you. And if you need a marriage counselor, go get one. Call them today. And if you don't have a good one, we would encourage you guys to check out our friends who've helped us a ton, which is Dr. Glenn and Miss Phyllis Hill. They've written a book called Connection Codes, and we have, I don't know how many pastors we've either, tried to support or encourage to go and connect with them or do connection codes. So shameless plug here for our friends. We're not getting a cut off that, by the way. But if you guys do need some help, I know there's a ton of pastors who have been helped by Glenn and Phyllis. And so I just wanted to throw that out there before we sign off.
That's great.
Thank you for joining me on my podcast. I think we should do this more often.
Was I your favorite podcast guest?
Duh.
Oh, yes.
The best. The hottest. That's for sure.
That feels right.
Definitely more hot than Everett.
But Everett's so nice.
I know, he's in the room, which is why I said that. And we did a podcast together, which was super fun. So we got to do that again as well.
Yep.
But thank you for joining me. As always, guys, please subscribe, do all the things. It helps us because the more people who subscribe and like and listen, then the more guests we can have on, right? Everybody wants to be a part of a podcast that's reaching a lot of people. So if you're watching but you won't subscribe, you're limiting the episodes we can put out in the future. Come on, be a part of this. So that's my call. Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. God bless you, and we'll see you again next time.